In part 7 of this series, we went over the birth of religion. We discussed how paganism was started and what Satan created in order to get the world to start worshiping him. He displayed himself to many different cultures, and this became the main influence that has spread throughout the world since the ancient times. It's how religion was created. And as we go throughout history, we see how the influence of this spread and took hold. Now, as we continue to wake up and understand this world, we must go into understanding the way the world split and how the nations grew. We are about to enter into a lot of different parts of the truth. But just as the word does, I want to make sure that I cover this topic first. When we're reading our Bible and we get to Genesis chapter 10, it could be a natural feeling to get to all these names and then just say it doesn't matter and you want to just skip to the next chapter. But you see, our Father made sure these names were in the scriptures for a reason. And so before we move on to understanding how our Father fulfilled his promise to bruise the head of the serpent, we must understand the world. So what I want to do is explain the history of the nations and how the world was divided. And so we will do this by discussing Genesis chapter 10. Let's begin. Okay, so as I said, this may be a part of the Bible that you often skim through because it can seem like a bunch of names that you don't know or care about. But these names are very important, and when understood, it can provide clarity on this world that we live in today. Now, let me give this disclaimer that this is not comprehensive. You may ask me questions like, so where did Asians like the people of China come from? Or what about Native Americans? I've done a lot of research, and some things I just haven't gotten clear indication of. I mean, I could tell you what I personally believe, like with China, most people believe that they're from Japheth, but I believe that they're most likely an intermingling of Japheth and Ham. Like I believe there are some descendants from the Khoisan tribe who more than likely intermingled with some tribe of Japheth and migrated east. Or I believe some of the Native Americans are some of the children of Canaan, like the Chemos tribe, people who we call Native Americans. I believe they are the Chemothi tribe of the children of Canaan that migrated before the split of the earth. And I could give you all of my rationale for it, but it doesn't really make it right, just maybe some interesting conclusions. And so I don't like teaching like that. So again, this is not going to be comprehensive because I don't want to just give you opinion. So I say all that to say, I do not have all the answers. I just hope that from what I do know, it can provide some clarity on the world and the people in it, so you understand how the world was separated after the Tower of Babel. So with all that said, let's just get to it. So in parts 5 through 7, we spoke extensively about Nimrod and Samaria and the Tower of Babel. Now you should understand that because of the rebellion at Babel, Yahweh came down and he confused the languages, which caused the building of the tower to cease. After this, all these different tribes dispersed in the world and they began to populate the earth. So this moment in time that we're about to discuss is technically the beginning of the history of this world. Everything and everyone in the world descends from these people who migrated. So we must start here to understand. So broken down at the simplest level, the division of man today starts with the three sons of Noah. They were Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And from these three sons, the world was repopulated. So if we were to really classify people today, it would be proper to classify people according to this. There are Shemites, Hamites, and Japhites. We do not and we should not classify people according to the color of their skin. We can classify them, though, according to their tribe of which they descend from. Now, here's the challenge, and I want to make this known right now. We do not have our own maps. We are dealing with the maps of our oppressors. The same people who have been plotting this New World Order are the same people who made our maps. And so much of the territories I could be speaking of could be based upon what they have shown us and not actually be the original biblical areas. There are many more knowledgeable in this than me that can speak to the true areas on our maps. So please bear with me in that regard. What I'm trying to explain here is not the authenticity of our maps, but the way that the world was divided long before race and the color of our skin was ever used. It starts in Genesis chapter 10. Verse 1 says, "Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood." And then the verses that follow after this deal with each son of Noah. Japheth is first. Japheth is probably the least discussed son of Noah, and there is reason why. Genesis chapter 10, verse 2 through 5 goes over the children of Japheth. It says, the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Verse 5 says that from these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. Okay, so Japheth occupied the Isles of the Gentiles, which were the shore territories of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and parts of Asia Minor, from where they dispersed northward over the entire continent of Europe and a great part of Asia. Japheth's descendants traveled west, north, and northeast of the mountain of Ararat and the Caucasus Mountains. The Japhethites settled near the mountains of Taurus and Amanus in Turkey. They journeyed to the river Tanais in southeast Russia and along Europe to Cadiz, Spain. Let's talk about the sons of Japheth. Again, they were Gomer, Magog, Yavan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Again, this is Genesis chapter 10, verse 2. Gomer was the ancestor of the first Cimmerians and of the later Cimbri. These people include offshoots of the Celtic family and of the present-day Gaels of Ireland, Scotland, and the Hebrides Islands. Then the second son of Japheth was Magog. Flavius Josephus said that the Greeks called these people Scythians. The Scythians included all the wandering tribes who dwelt mostly near the north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They later migrated to Central Asia, Russia, and Ukraine. The third son of Japheth was Madai, the father of the Medes. They were located at the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and they later united with the Persians to form one people which we know as the Medo-Persians. The fourth son of Japheth was Javan, better as Yavan, being that the letter J did not exist at that beginning. From him came the Ionians and all the Greeks. We also find Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, Japheth's grandson. He formed the Germanic race, better known as the Germans. In the Hebrew language, the word Ashkenaz literally means Germans. This is also where the Ashkenazi Jews of Europe descend from. Tubal, the fifth son of Japheth, is associated with Yavan. We see in scripture it says, "I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my fame, nor seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles." Isaiah chapter 66, verse 19. Meshech and Tubal are nations of the north. It says, "There are Meshech and Tubal and all their multitudes, with all their graves around it, all them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living." Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 26. You see, there's a reason why they don't talk about who they all descend from. You see, Josephus identified the descendants of Tubal with the early Iberians. The last son of Japheth was Tiras, the father or ancestor of the Thracians. This land, Thrace, was situated north of Turkey, Asia Minor, and northeast of Greece. Now, an interesting point to know, in the 4th century, the Germanic tribes that came out of Ashkenaz, they were on the move. They were known under these names: the Lombards, Burgundians, Franks, Saxons, Angles, Jutes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Suevists, and Vandals. These 10 Germanic barbarian tribes settled all over West Europe, and they intermingled with the modern nations of Western Europe as we know them today. And this is where we get Europeans. The children of Japheth are where we get Europeans from today. Now here's something to understand. The reason why they don't speak about this history in a great way is because it does not align with their doctrine of white supremacy. White supremacy must be made to feel like they are the dominant leaders of this world. And though in our modern history, they absolutely can be claimed to be in dominance and power and control, I mean, that's undeniable. When you actually know who they are and actually apply the Bible that they have controlled how we read and what we know of it, we can know where this dominance will lead them. For instance, the Most High is completely against many of these sons of Japheth, like we just read some of that scripture. In the last battle, what we know as the Battle of Armageddon, Yahweh prophesies this. Let's read it. "And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of Adam, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahweh, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn you back, and put hooks into your jaw, and I will bring you forth, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Cush, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Tagarma of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with you. Be prepared and prepare yourself, you and all your company that are assembled unto you, and be you a guard unto them. After many days you shall be visited. In the latter years you shall come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Yasharel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. You shall ascend and come like a storm. You shall be like a cloud to cover the land, you and all your bands, and many people with you. Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into your mind, and you shall think an evil thought, and you shall say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn your hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations which have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land. Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 1 through 12. Notice the nations that he's speaking against. Also, therefore, son of Adam, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tabal, and I will turn you back, and leave but the sixth part of you, and will cause you to come up from the north parts, and will bring you upon the mountains of Yasharel. And I will smite your bow out of your left hand, and will cause your arrows to fall out of your right hand. You shall fall upon the mountains of Yasharel, you and all your bands, and the people that is with you. I will give you unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. You shall fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, says Adonai Yahuwah. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah. Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. What you're reading here are Yah talking about the tribes of the people of Europe and also of Africa that will come against Yah's chosen people when they are gathered and dwell securely, but then these people will be destroyed. This is their history. This is what they have coming to them. And because of what is prophesied of them, our knowledge is not given truly about them. Their doctrines and their ways of this world is what most of us are actually following today. We are following the people of Japheth, and they have judgment upon them. But understand what their future is. These people are going to be used to come against Yah's chosen people in the final days. The people that are today classified as the white races, they began near the Caucasus Mountains, and from there they spread north, northwest, and northeast into Europe and Asiatic Russia. And so don't ever just look at them as the skin color. If you can, you get more information on where they come from with their family history so you can understand what tribe of Japheth they descend from. Now, let me also just say that just because this is the judgment that is prophesied against the nation as a whole, that does not mean that these people individually cannot repent and turn to Yahuwah and come out of that judgment and not be a part of that at all. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever, so don't take that from me. I'm just identifying who these people are for you. Let's continue on. We'll continue and move on to Ham. Genesis chapter 10. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabekta, and Nimrod. Understand, all these sons were Cushites. They dwelt in this land of northeastern Africa in the Nile Valley, south of Egypt. They spread along the tracts extending from the higher Nile to the Euphrates and the Tigris River. From Cush is who we know as Ethiopia. When you just heard Yah speak about Ethiopia, this is who he's speaking against. Please understand that Ethiopia was not as small as the nation it represents today. Now, of Cush's notable sons, we know of Nimrod, the father god of paganism. We spoke about him a great deal. Chapter 10 says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Again, if you look for the definition of Shinar, you'll see that this is just another name for Sumer or Samaria, later known as Babylon, after the Tower of Babel. After Cush, the other son of Ham was Mizraim. Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt. The word Mizraim is plural form, meaning upper and lower Egypt. They were the second world empire after Samaria, Babylon. Verse 13 of chapter 10 says, Mizraim begot Ludum, Anamim, Lahabim, Naphtuhim, Pathruzim, and Kalsulim, from whom came the Philistines and Caphtorim. So you understand that from these tribes is where the Philistines come from. The Philistines were a tribe of people who were once a major opponent of the Israelites. Let's cover another son of Ham who was Canaan. When you read the Bible and the children of Israel coming back to take their land, the land of Canaan, this is who the land of Canaan obviously came from. The Canaanites are what we know today as the Africans. Verse 15 says, Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, and the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Afterward, the families of the Canaanites were dispersed. The Hamites' civilization included the continent of Africa. Now, the book of Jubilees says, and Ham divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush towards the east, and to the west of him for Mizraim, and to the west of him for Put, and to the west of him, and to the west thereof, on the sea for Canaan. Jubilees chapter 9, verse 1. Again, like I mentioned earlier, all that land, I believe, North and South America, I believe that was all for Canaan before the land split and we have continents. But that's how Ham divided the land. And many Hamites didn't migrate towards the east and the south. Now, the thing is that most of Canaan did not go into the land until they was cast out. They took other land, and that land was later known as the land of Canaan. They migrated into Shem's land and occupied it. This happened after the Tower of Babel. It says, in the 4th week, in the 1st year, in the beginning thereof, in the 4th and 30th Jubilee, were they dispersed from the land of Shinar. And Ham and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy, which he acquired as his portion in the land of the south. And Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Mizraim, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that is to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward, from the border of the Jordan and from the border of the sea. And Ham his father, and Cush and Mizraim his brothers, said unto him, You have settled in a land which is not yours, which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do so, you and your sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. For by sedition you have settled, and by sedition will your children fall, and you shall be rooted out forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for to Shem and to his sons did it come by their lot. Cursed are you, and cursed shall you be beyond all the sons of Noah, by the curse by which we bound ourselves by an oath in the presence of the holy judge, and in the presence of Noah our father. But he did not hearken unto them, and dwelt in the land of Lebanon, from Hamath to the entering of Mizraim, he and his sons until this day. And for this reason, that land is named Canaan. That's Jubilees chapter 10, verses 27 through 34. You see, Canaan took Shem's land, and this is why in the scriptures it's called the land of Canaan. There were 11 Canaanite tribes living in the land of Canaan and surrounding it before the Israelites took back their inheritance. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Canaanites. One of the greatest cultural and commercial sites of these Canaanites were Tyre and Sidon. The Sidonians and Tyrians were from the same people. The city Sidon or Zidon gets its name from the firstborn son of Canaan. Zidon was the first son of Canaan, and where we get the Sidonians. In many history books, you'll read about the Sidonians under the name of the Phoenicians. The Greeks called the Sidonians Phoenicians, land of palm, because they found many palm trees there. And that's why tracing down a lot of these tribes is so hard, because the Greeks later renamed a lot of tribes, and most of our influence today comes from the Greeks. But either way, the Sidonians, they called their nation by the name of Canaan. Now understand some things. You see, due to white supremacy, at some point, they whitewashed history and confused everything. If we were to look at things from their racial perspective, you would see that these civilizations were by people of darker skin who they classify as black people. But if you just do a Google search about the Phoenicians and look at the images, many of those images tell a very different story. You see, they whitewashed and confused history. The point that I'm trying to display is that even though they were what we would be considered black people, they still were not related to the Israelites who later came back and took back their land of inheritance in Canaan. There were 11 Canaanite tribes. They were the Sidonians, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Arkites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. This is according to Genesis chapter 10, verses 15 through 18. So let's just be clear, the Phoenicians, they were Canaanites, or what we will refer to today as Africans. The Phoenician language of the Canaanites can be classified as an African language because the Canaanites were of Ham. They were blood brothers of the Egyptians, Ethiopians, aka Cushites, Nubians, Sudanese, and other Africans. This is based upon Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. The Phoenicians established a colony in North Africa called Carthage, and they were known as the Carthaginians, and they always considered themselves Canaanites. Let me explain where I'm going with this. It is written in the Babylonian Talmud, the book used by the modern-day Jewish people who are truly Japheth. It is written in their book. For when the Africans came to plead against the Jews before Alexander of Macedon, they said, Canaan belongs to us, as it is written, the land of Canaan with the coast thereof. And Canaan was the ancestor of these people, i.e. ourselves, just proving that the Canaanites were what we call Africans. Africans came to Alexander claiming that the land of Canaan belonged to them. So let's add to it. If you understand language, the Phoenician Canaanite language is very similar to Hebrew. I'm not talking about modern Hebrew. Leave modern Hebrew out of it. As we look at this source from the World History Encyclopedia, it says in reference to the Phoenician alphabet and language. Phoenician is a Canaanite language closely related to Hebrew. Very little is known about the Canaanite language except what can be gathered from the El Armana letters written by Canaanite kings to Pharaoh Amenhotep, 1402 to 1364 BC, and Akhenaten in 1364 to 1347 BC. According to Smith's Bible Dictionary, under the term Canaanite, he writes, applies as a general name to the non-Israelite inhabitants of the land, as we have already seen was the case with Canaan. Instances of this are Genesis chapter 12, verse 6, Numbers chapter 21, verse 3. The Canaanites were descendants of Canaan. Their language was very similar to Hebrew. And you see, we know this to be true because when Abraham came from the region of Babylon into the land of Canaan, we read about this move in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. He communicated very well with the inhabitants of this land that he was in. He adopted it, and he did make certain modifications, and it became known as Ivri, or what we know as Hebrew. Remember, this is at the same time when Yah confused all the languages, but Abraham was able to communicate with the Canaanites. So consequently, we can say that the Hebrew Canaanite language is one of the African languages. What is my point? Hebrew is not tied to any of the European dialects. That's what I'm explaining. That's just another lie from the modern world. Here's an interesting point. The English alphabet is derived from two ancient, what we would call black today, nations. It's influenced from the Phoenician Canaanite alphabet and the Hebrew. This is according to Herbert Wendt in his book, It Began in Babel, on page 94. He wrote, the Phoenicians had a very powerful navy. They were a great trading people. When the Phoenicians traded with the Greeks did not have an alphabet. As a result, they adopted the Phoenician alphabet in order to transact business. The Greeks passed this alphabet to the Romans, and the Romans transmitted it to the German Anglo-Saxon tribes. Then it was brought to the British Isles. Okay, the point that needs to be understood is that the narrative that people hold on today in regards to nationalities and culture, it is not based on truth, but based on falsehoods, biases, and lies. Now, one point I need to make before I get to Shem, we must discuss the curse of Canaan. It says, and Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk. It became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Then he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May Elohim enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 through 27. You see, the curse of Canaan is something that the wicked men of today have falsely applied to the Negroes who are in captivity in America. Now, you see the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28. They want to ignore all of those curses that speak in greater detail and describe us to the T. But they want to ignore all of that and tell us that we were slaves because of the curse of Canaan. You have to understand that this thought comes from the same man who spread this pre-tribulation rapture nonsense. These same Christians who believe in the pre-tribulation rapture are the same ones who were taught this nonsense about justifying slavery because of the curse of Canaan. This thought comes from Schofield. In his Bible that he put all his reference notes in, he added a reference to the curse of Canaan. The Schofield notes connect this curse of Canaan to a legal rationale for the land of Canaan being given to the Israelites, and that's fine. It links Canaan's descendants to servitude. That's fine. That's scriptural. But what they do with it is they say, therefore, this is why it's okay for these Americans to enslave us, because first it says, may he enlarge Japheth, and then it also says that Canaan is going to be in servitude. And this is why many Christians just look at Negroes in this way, like we don't matter. You see, Christians use the Bible in an attempt to justify their racist behavior. The Schofield Study Bible of 1917 included this footnote in Genesis 9, verse 21. A prophetic declaration is made that from Japheth will descend the enlarged races. Genesis chapter 9, verse 27. Government, science, and art, speaking broadly, are and have been Japhetic, so that history is the indisputable record of the exact fulfillment of these declarations. Genesis chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. A prophetic declaration is made that from Ham will descend an inferior and servile posterity. You see, Schofield's interpretation is that the curse of Canaan is a curse that condemned the entire continent of Africa, and being that they just call the Negroes Africans, as if all of Africa is the same tribe, they justified slavery and oppression because of this. And so when you speak to Christians and talk about our ancestry, they will just tell you this happened to us because of the curse of Ham. They don't even say Canaan most of the time because they haven't truly read it themselves to understand. But this is what they easily believe, and they know that we're cursed, but when you show them the curses of Deuteronomy 28, they want to ignore that and deflect. I just want you to understand where this lie comes from. It comes from Schofield. This man was wicked. The way they used the curse of Canaan is completely incorrect. That's why I want you to understand. Let's continue. We will lastly discuss Shem, who we know as the Shemites. Chapter 11 of the book of Genesis goes over the sons of Shem until we get to Abram, who later will be named Abraham. Now, I will not be covering Abraham in this part because he needs his own attention, so we will get to him in the next part. Now, the Shemites, they migrated amongst Africa and Asia. The sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Genesis chapter 10, verse 22. When speaking of Elam, this is the Elamites who settled in the region of Elam. This corresponds to modern-day southwestern Iran. They are mentioned often by the prophets. Asher is where the Assyrians come from. These people of Shem, they spread around in the Middle East region. Now the line of Arphaxad is where we follow to get to Abraham. His grandson is Eber. Eber is who we get the word Ivri from, which is what a Hebrew is. He had two sons, Peleg and Yoktan. The son Yoktan is mentioned as the progenitor of 13 sons or head of tribes, supposed to have resided in southern Arabia. All these were the sons of Yoktan, and their dwelling place was from Mesha as you go towards Sephir, the mountain of the east. That's Genesis chapter 10, verse 26 through 30. Now, the position of Mesha, which is reasonably supposed to be the western boundary, that's still uncertain. But Sefer is well established as being the same Safari, the seaport town on the east of the modern Yemen, and formerly one of the chief centers of the great Indian and African trade. So we know where many of the Shemites dwelled and positioned themselves. Now, as I said, I'm going to cover Abraham on his own, but I do need to cover Ishmael. Abraham was not only the father of the Israelite nation, but also of the Arab nation. Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Genesis chapter 16, verse 1 says, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian and maidservant whose name was Hagar. Hagar bore Abraham's first son, Ishmael." And Joshua writes, "And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, was grown up in those days. He was 14 years old when Sarah bore Isaac to Abraham. And Elohim was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham. And he grew up, and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him. And he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it and intended to slay Isaac. And Sarah saw the act what Ishmael desired to do her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, 'Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son, for thus did he seek to do unto him this day.' And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah, and he rose up early in the morning, and he took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, which he gave to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. And Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they dwelt in the wilderness of Paran with the inhabitants of the wilderness. And Ishmael was an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness a long time. And he and his mother afterward went to the land of Mitzrayim, and they dwelt there. And Hagar took a woman for her son from Mitzrayim, and her name was Merivah. And the woman of Ishmael conceived and bore 4 sons and 2 daughters, and Ishmael and his mother and his woman and the children afterward went and returned to the wilderness. And they made themselves tents in the wilderness in which they dwelt, and they continued to travel and then to rest monthly and yearly. And Elohim gave Ishmael flocks and herds and tents on account of Abraham his father. And the man increased in cattle. And Ishmael dwelt in deserts and in tents, traveling and resting for a long time, and he did not see the face of his father." Joshua chapter 21, verses 11 through 21. So Ishmael was intermingled, and I will be getting to that point soon, because most people don't truly understand what it is that they're seeing in this world today. But Ishmael, he was intermingled. He was a blend of Shem and Ham. Abraham was of Shem, Hagar was of Ham, because she was an Egyptian. Ishmael's first wife was an Egyptian, but because your ancestry passed down through the father, Ishmael and his children were still a Shemite. Scriptures don't really speak of his descendants, but other historians note that he married an Egyptian woman and he had 12 sons. These 12 sons became 12 tribes and inhabited the region from the Euphrates to the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula. And so the people in this land are known as the children of Ishmael, which is why the Muslims do not reject the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. It is because they know their ancestry comes from Abraham. Now understand, there are many darker skinned people in these regions, but if you never visited these places and you only see what is shown on the television, you may want to believe that they are lighter skinned people. Most Americans will tell you that they know Jesus wasn't white, but he definitely wasn't black either. He was what they call olive skin, and looks like what we know as the people in the Middle East today. First off, I've never seen a green skinned person. There are black olives though, but either way, that's what they say. What is left out of the equation though, when they're saying this, is the intermingling. At the time of world conquest, as the Greeks and the Romans conquered the known world, there was an extreme amount of intermingling. The tribes of Japheth intermingled with the tribes of Ham and Shem everywhere they traveled and or conquered. This mingling made the people in Syria, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, India, and parts of Arabia much lighter in complexion. The color of these people in this region ranged from brown to yellow. The Greek and Roman invasions made these people in the Middle East lighter. And this is what you see and what is shown on the television and news and entertainment. They don't often show the darker complexions of the people in the Middle East, like these people in Yemen.
Distinguished by their dark skin, they are the untouchables of Yemen. They are known as the Akhdam, an Arabic name for servants. They prefer to be called the marginalized ones, a caste languishing at Yemen's lowest social order.
The thing is that this is not what the Middle East always looked like. Again, when Greek Hellenized the world with their Greek culture, there was a lot of intermingling between the tribes. So Japhites and Hamites and Shemites were often being mixed together. This is easily understood when analyzing the Egyptians. The Egyptian Empire was the second world empire, and it's not very hard to understand that these people, they were very darker skinned people. The thing about black skin is that our melanin literally allows us to absorb the sun, which made our skins compatible with the climate in the Middle East and Northern Africa. Now, after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and established his major city, Alexandria, in Egypt, it's very easy to see how the Greeks cohabitated and intermingled with the Egyptians. This happened in many places all over the conquered world. You should understand that Israelites are the only people who had laws against this intermingling. But they broke those laws too, and I will get to that. It's important to understand the mind control that was done in order to get people to view the world in this way that they do today. When you go back and look at the movies of the 80s and the 90s, you can see how they were consciously programming us to look at the people of the Middle East, how they wanted us to see them. Movies like Indiana Jones only casted the lighter-skinned Arab peoples. Movies like True Lies and others that made us begin to look at the Muslims as terrorists, they made sure that they showed us one type of people in one way. And this was intentional. It makes us feel that this was what everyone in the Middle East looks like. So when I hear someone say that Jesus wasn't white, but he definitely wasn't black either, he just looks like someone from the Middle East, it's easy to see that this person is under the mind controlling program that implanted this way of thinking. The way the modern people in the Middle East look today is due to intermingling. It has nothing to do with what it was like when Yahushua was walking this earth. It's not based upon a historic way that they have always looked. They are intermingled. For a modern day example of this, let me give you something tangible. Look at the NBA today. What we see is a different league than when the time of Jordan and Kobe. Most of these players today are children of former NBA players that intermingled with European women or vice versa, like with Paolo Banchero from the Orlando Magic. By looking at him at first, I thought he was Mexican or something, but his mama is a Negro woman and his dad is Italian. Look at many children of interracial marriages and families. They have different looks and different skin colors. What we see in the Middle East is a product of this. People don't recognize this because it's not taught to them. But if you know the history of the world and understand the original tribes of the people in these lands, and then you know the conquerors, the history of the world makes a lot more sense. You cannot forget the intermingling of the different nations, and that's what I want to be understood. That's why classifying people according to skin color is very dumb. But this is how the world was divided. And obviously, over time, many of these people continue to move in all directions, east, west, north, and south, and they populated the earth. And this is how the world became divided. It's important to understand this division because it gives you a clear view of this world. The world wants you to be divided by race and look at the world by skin color, except for when looking at the Jewish people. They want you to look at people by the fake borders that they have assigned and the fake nations that they created. When you understand things the way our Father established things, it may not help you understand who certain people are today because of the intermingling and the fake nations that they created, but it will help you understand the scriptures and why Israel was important and why they were different. If you understand the world by tribes, tongues, and nations, you can understand what being set apart truly means. You can understand better the covenant and plan that Yahweh had to bless the world through. You can understand the Bible just by understanding the division of the nations. So if you have this mindset, it can help you better process what it is that you're reading. So now that this is explained, we must move on to understanding Abraham. And so we will deal with him next. He is extremely important, and if you don't understand Abraham, you can misunderstand this whole entire Bible. He's that important, so we must break him down, and so we're going to do that next. So please, go to part 9 of this playlist and continue to grow in knowledge and in truth. Live your life in the truth and stay out of the lies, because the kingdom of Yahuwah is truly at hand. Be ready for it. And be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it with others. Please share this with any of your family and your friends that say that they're trying to wake up. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday, also now Sundays and Tuesdays. Please don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram to find out when these videos are posted. As always, I would like to give a special thank you to those who have donated and contributed to this ministry. Thank you. You know who you are. Your contribution and support are a huge blessing to this ministry, and I truly am humbled by your support. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.